Well, we have made it to the last section of the chapter, 2.10, percent increase and decrease. So table of contents, date, and we'll get started. So to find a percent increase or decrease, we're talking about a percent change. There's a little formula to follow. So to find a percent change, you take the amount of increase or decrease, and you always divide by the original amount. So to find the amount of increase or decrease, that just means you're going to subtract. And then the original amount, you can also think of that as the starting amount. That should say amount. There we go. And then you do have to write your answer as a percent. So in the end, you'll change it into a percent for your final answer. So let's look at a few examples so that we can make sense of this. Here are some basic ideas. Find each percent change. So if you're going from 25 to 45, I know that we're increasing by 20, but what percent did we increase by? So to follow our formula, we subtract the numbers. I always just take the bigger number minus the smaller number, 45 minus 25. And we divide it by the original amount or the starting amount. And because it says we're going from 25, that means that 25 is our starting amount. So we go ahead and subtract, and we get 20 on the top over 25 on the bottom. And then you grab your calculators and you just divide that out. 20 divided by 25. And you get 0.8. Now remember, we have to express it as a percent. So we have a decimal. Let's move our percent 2 spots to the right. And that's going to give us 80%. And the last thing we have to do, and this, it might be kind of obvious, but we just have to be clear about it, is it an 80% increase or an 80% decrease? And you look back at the problem and you say, well, I went from a 25 to a 45, which is bigger, so that means it's an increase. So 80%, we just write the word increase with it. And that's our answer. So what they're saying is whatever your starting amount is, so 25 is your starting amount on this example. If I increased by 25%, that would be increasing it by 100%. So if you increase your number by itself, that's 100%. If you can see, we went from 25 to 45, we increased by 20, which isn't all the way up to 25, but it's close. That's why we had a higher percentage, 80% increase. If it said from 25 to 30, that only went up by 5. And 5 is a small part of the 25 starting value, so that's why that would be a smaller percent increase. I don't know if that made any sense, but that's what's going on here. All right, so if we're going from 10 to 8, to find the percent change, first we subtract bigger minus smaller, 10 minus 8, and divide by your starting amount. Well, we went from 10, so it starts with 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. Now, if you can see, we had 10 and we only decreased by 2, so that's going to give us a smaller percent than the last one. Over 10. And then you just say, well, what's 2 divided by 10? And it's a 0.2. Turn it into a decimal, move it 2 spots to the right, and we get 20%. Now, is it a 20% increase or a 20% decrease? And because we went from 10 down to an 8, that is a decrease. So that's your basic use of percent change. We'll look at a couple other types of examples, but that's what we're looking at here. You'll see questions like this also. Find the result when 40 is increased by 85%. So this falls under percent change because they actually gave us the percent change. We know that it's increasing by 85%. So the easiest way to do a problem like this is to start out with multiplication. It says find the result when 40 is increased by 85%. So what is 85% of 40? We can do straight multiplication with that. Anytime you want to know a percentage of a number, just multiply. 85% as a decimal is 0.85 multiply it by 40, and you get 34. So we're saying that 40 is being increased by 85%, and now we know that 85% is 34. So we go back to the 40, and we're going to increase it by 34. That means we're going to add 34. And find the result. Well, the result is 74. It's not 74%, it's just 74. So on this one, the first thing we had to do is figure out what was 85% of the 40 to get started. Next example, find the result when 16 is decreased by 40%. So what is 40% of 16? Let's figure that out first. So 40% as a decimal, 0.40, multiply it by your 16, and you get 6.4. So go back to the original. 16 is being decreased by 40%. So decrease means let's subtract by 6.4, and we get 9.6 for our final answer. All right, so here's a sentence that, yes, you should write in your notes. It's only a sentence, won't kill you. Johnny used a coupon and paid $7.35 for a pizza that normally costs $10.50. Find the percent discount. So here's an example where this percent discount, that is the same thing as a percent change. So if you have kind of a real life example where they give you a starting amount and the ending amount, and they're asking for how the percent discount, or you know, what percent did it change by, however they might phrase it. We know we have to have a percent answer. This is a percent change. So we can go back to our percent change formula. So find the difference of them. So we'll subtract $10.50 minus, this is the first formula from our notes, 7.35, divide it by the starting amount. Well, he paid $7.35 for it, but it says the pizza normally costs $10.50. So $10.50 is our starting amount. So we take our $10.50, subtract out $7.35, and it gives us $3.15 over $10.50. Then you just divide that on your calculator. Don't press buttons incorrectly like I've done 5 times in a row now. Alright, gives us 0.3. Now again, we're looking for a percent discount, so that means take that 0.3 and turn it into a percent, move it over 2 spots to the right, and we're looking at a 30% discount. So that's what more of a real life example might look like when you're trying to find a percent change. Whether it's an increase or decrease, they gave us the starting amount, the ending amount, and they're asking for the percent. Okay, this is our last example for this section, last slide. It's kind of doesn't have anything to do with percent change, but we need to talk about it anyway, so we're going to talk about it here. Go ahead and draw these triangles into your notes, label everything accurately, and we're going to talk about similar shapes for a minute. So these are similar shapes. We are given a similarity statement up here. It says triangle BCD is similar to triangle FGD. What that means is that these two shapes are proportional, and it's the sides that are proportional. Basically, if I took one shape and I made it bigger, this is easier to show on a smartboard. You can make it bigger at the same rate, basically. That's a similar shape. All the angles will be the same, but the sides will be proportional. So to solve, we set up a proportion and cross multiply and solve. So we're trying to figure out what x is. X is over here in this triangle. But first thing we want to do is figure out which sides go together, which sides match up. And it's this similarity statement that tells us how to do that. So we just go piece by piece and we get our triangle labeled, and then we'll set up our statement. So the way that this is written, it says triangle BC. So the first two letters, BC, I'm going to find in the triangle on the left, and I'm going to put one little mark on it. BC is similar to triangle, and it's going to match up with the first two letters over here, FG. So I go to the second triangle and I look for FG. So now I know that those two sides match up. Now I'm looking for the next two letters. That's going to be the C and D. So I find my CD. This time I'm going to put 2 marks on it. Is similar to, and I go to the second two letters over here, the GD. So I look for the GD, and those match up. All right, now we've just matched up 2 of our 3 sides of a triangle, so basically your third side, I'll go ahead and put 3 marks on it, matches up with the third side over here. So here's our small triangle, and here's our big triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a side from the small triangle, and if you look at the one that has the 1 mark, this 7 I can see matches up with the x. So I'm going to go ahead and say 7 over x. Off on the side, I'm going to make a note that I have the small triangle on top and the big triangle on the bottom. I'm going to set that equal to, now I just need another side to match up. Well, if I look at the one with the 2 marks, this 2 mark over in this triangle doesn't have anything labeled. So if I go over to this 2 mark, this 87.5, that's an extra piece of information that you do not need to use. So sometimes they give you extra numbers, throws us off, but just know that you don't have to use every number in the problem because this side matches up with this side, but there's no number over there, so I'm not even going to worry about it. So I go to my one with the 3 marks over here, this 8. So 8 is from the small triangle, so I'm going to put it on top across from the 7 from the small triangle. That is getting matched up with, I look for my 3 sides in this big triangle and I can see that's the 10. So now you have your simple proportion to solve. Cross multiply, solve for x, but one thing that we had to do is make sure that we had, for me the small triangle was on the left, so the numbers on top are all from the small triangle and the numbers on the bottom are all from the big triangle. So you cross multiply, you get 8x equals 70. You divide by 8. I think we're going to get a number with a decimal. 70 divided by 8, and we get 8.75. And let's remember to put a label on this. Everything's in feet, so we're looking at 8.75 feet. And that's how you do similar triangles.